Welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan. I am a wellness and mindset coach, the creator of the integrated sustainable wellness approach. This podcast is all things abundant mindset, healthy habits, and optimal wellness. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Zack Rutldege. He is an ACE certified personal trainer and ACE certified fitness nutrition specialist, certified brain health trainer, and all through the Functional Aging Institute. He has a black belt in karate and has practiced yoga for almost a decade. I'm sure we have a lot to share on the yoga side of things. He holds an MA from American University in Washington, D.C., and started his licensed professional counselor program in January of 2022. He's going to tell us all about his book, The Depression Relief Playbook, amongst other things. So let's dive in. Hi, Zack. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. How are you today?
No, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor. And I honestly really do love what you do. I was trying to say that before we recorded, but then that Zoom started talking to us. And I think the Zoom talking cut me off. But yeah, I really do love everything you do. So yeah, this is a real honor.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, can you tell us, I don't know, where should we start? I love how you integrate a lot of things that I love too. So can we start with the physical practice? Have you always done yoga and karate? And how do you feel that those things are related to each other and to your mental health?
Yeah. So actually, that's where one of the places I love to start is the physical, right? Because that's something that you can see. So once you start getting that physical transformation, and you start, in my case, it was building the muscle. So a lot of the time I understand people are coming from, whether they're depressed or not, they're coming from a place of being overweight, and that can be from just overall stress or what have you. I actually came from the other end. So just to give you a quick idea, I'm 5'9" and I'm 170 pounds, which is, nothing to really remark on. However, I was 124 pounds.
Wow.
So yeah, in my deepest, darkest days. So I'm actually coming from the other end. Yeah. So seeing those physical changes was pretty important because, like my doctor said, if I had gotten sick, I had nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it was getting a little scary there. So anyway, that being said, karate I actually did mostly as a teen. I did it from about the age 11 to to 18 when my karate school shut down, and loved it. And I love the whole working out aspect of it, but really what I gained most from it was like the working in, which is a lot of what yoga has as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it was just kind of like I took it for granted at the time, right? When you're a teenager, that most teenagers aren't, doing meditation exercises. So that was a really, really I just happened to fall into this really great martial art that worried about that kind of stuff or concentrated on that kind of stuff. And it wasn't just like a mixed martial art like a lot of people do now, where it's just like grappling and fighting on the floor and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I was very lucky with that. Now, I didn't start yoga till I was in grad school, actually. It's a brief, funny story. It's worth telling. So our gym was like a normal gym with all the weights and stuff. And then there was a separated room and we were having a yoga class in there. And I was just going because it was free. And there was a girl who was just out of high school. And she said to me, we were talking before the class, she said, "You see all these guys out there moving all these weights around? They have no idea what fitness is." And she was totally right. I'd never been so sore in my life, right? So I don't need to explain to you like the magic of yoga, right? I've been hooked since. I don't need to explain it to you either. But if you haven't done it, you will love it, and you'll become an evangelist like us, because it's just radically changing. It's not just the the external stuff, like the physical stuff, but the working in as well. It's like my new martial art is what I call it. Lots of crossover there, definitely. Obviously, you're not fighting anybody in yoga, but that's great too. You know,
essentially yourself or your mind, right?
Right. Yeah.
So how all the things that you are so passionate, interested in, were a result of your own depression, like trying to understand yourself better, or did it somewhat do the other way around?
No. This was like I say I built myself back up brick by brick, and it took me many years to do that. And essentially, like the book came, it's like a consolidation of all the things I've learned over the years, and just trying to kind of speed up that process for other people. It's the things I've learned through the martial arts, through yoga, through my brain training, through, what have you, my nutrition training, things like that. My own experiences with, even medication I get into. But the idea to write the book, it didn't come until in COVID, actually. So my friend said that COVID was kind of like shaking the leaves from a tree. And we kind of found, if we had the insight, if we were lucky enough to have the insight, we found the things that really mattered to us. So I lost my day job, and I had some extra time, like a lot of us. I was still doing the training on the side, and I had time to reflect. It's like, what do I really want? So I was applying to grad schools to become a therapist, and the way mechanically the book came out, for lack of a better word, was back in grad school, people had known my journey, and there were a lot of people I went for film, and a lot of people in those creative circles tend to, I don't want to say all of them, but tend to deal with a lot of depression. And they were reaching out to me and asking me for advice. So I was writing all these emails to people because they would ask me for advice. I'd tell them, they'd forget. And then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm just going to write this down for you. And so I was compiling all these emails for people. And then the same thing happened with COVID. A lot of people didn't know how to deal with it, and they were becoming depressed, and they were like, well, you've been through this. How do you do it? So I said, you know what? I started sending emails to people, and I started taking my old emails from school, sending those. I said, this would just be way easier if I just wrote a book. That's honestly mechanically what happened. So I wrote this book just to give to my friends and get it out there. And I was kind of convinced by people. They're like, you should put this on Amazon or something and make this available to other people. So that's what happened. Yeah.
I love it. I feel like the best passion projects happen like that organically. It's like clear the path because that's what's being asked of you in the moment.
Yeah. It literally was being asked of me, so I just did it.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey with depression? Was there a certain catalyst, or did it happen? How young were you diagnosed?
Sure. So looking back, I had a very stable childhood and everything was, quote unquote normal. And, but looking back, now that I have the insight, there were definitely some chemical issues going on. No catalysts before I was 18, right? So, but I did have people saying things to me like, hey, are you okay? Just simple little things, right? Like adults saying things to me. And I just kind of, let it go. I just figured I was a moody punk rocker. And then when I was 18, the summer after high school, my best friend was killed. And that was when everything spiraled, right? So my theory is I was dysthymic, which is like, for people who don't know, that's like a low level depression, which has these sudden spikes. And if you go through something that's like a traumatic stress, that's, then you spiral a lot easier than other people. So it wasn't just grief I was going through. And it took me a little while to realize that, because grief is something that you have to go through. And grief, it sounds strange, but has like a cleaner feeling to it. This was grief compounded with, I say, the perfect storm. When a lot of the time in late teens, early 20s, quirks, let's say, tend to become heightened. So things like OCD or depression or what have you tend to kind of manifest a little stronger, right? That compounded with the accident, compounded with everyone I knew was leaving for college. So that was it. My social network was gone. This is before social media. So that was it, kind of on my own. Struggled to get through college. I actually dropped out of college after just a few weeks. And that is kind of like the start of this story, I guess, or where I started learning the hard lessons. That's the way I try to put it. That's why I started learning the things that could, now I can start helping other people with. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've noticed, like, it also coincided, didn't you say at 18 your karate school closed as well?
Oh, yeah. So that was the other thing. Yeah. So not only my high school friends were leaving, but my other big social, like my heart, it feels like, and they shut down as well. Yeah. So that was tough. That was a real tough few months, which turned into a tough few years.
So what or who inspired you to look for answers, start studying this yourself?
Well, there was a point where I was like, okay, internally, I was like, it's okay to take a semester off from college and try again. And then the spring came and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was spending so much time in bed and I just didn't have the physical energy. I didn't have the mental energy. So I did the worst thing possible. I started watching the news because I was like, I'm going to sharpen my mind. I'm going to get through one episode of a TV show because I couldn't focus on anything. It was really difficult. It's hard to even put that into words for people who haven't experienced it. Mm-hmm. But if you've been there, you understand just you cannot focus. So I was like, okay, I'm going to watch one TV show. And I figured, well, the news, smart people watch the news. I'll start watching the news. And it was horrific. It was like the worst thing I could do. But I figured, smart people watch the news, all that. And, but I was, I don't need to know about all the murders in Philadelphia. Like, I don't need to, it was just a bummer, for lack of a better word. Right. So after, it was, a few years, I still play in bands, but I was playing in bands at the time. And, I eventually hooked up with a band who were really into fitness. And that was what got it going. So like you said, it was that physical aspect. That was the first spark, followed by myriad of things, right? But that was the thing that started getting me going. And it's kind of like I'm sorry, I talk a lot, but it kind of goes with your story, right? How you're trying to bring women or people in general to this higher level, right? My goal now, because I understand the mindset of depression, they don't have the idea that things can be so great. They like people like you aren't even on their radar. But then to them, the idea of survival isn't even like appealing, right? So I want to convince these people, look, you can go 20 times more than you think. Like, you don't need to be at the bottom and then work your way up to barely off the bottom. Like, you can be absolutely fantastic, right? So, it's funny, like, I get a lot of compliments from people. I've gotten a few compliments, which were really kind, from like people who saying, like, this isn't just for people with depression. Like, this is just plain old good advice. If people do it, this is great, right? So that was like one of the nicest things people said to me, right? Like, that this is just good for anybody to kind of get to that higher level. So that was pretty exciting. But yeah, if we just can do the work, if you just get up and do it, you can. I mean, you're proof of this, right? You can get to these higher levels, but it takes work. You have to do the work.
Yeah. Well, briefly, my story. I mean, I, looking back, think since I was a teenager, like when I was 17, my father committed suicide, and I basically self-medicated, if you will, with alcohol. He was also an alcoholic for several decades. I'm sober 3 years now.
Congratulations.
And I think with that, quickly after becoming sober, I turned that energy towards running. And I found like that same high that I had, which I arguably never had the same high type energetic feeling of bliss with alcohol. I had maybe the sense of freedom, or so I thought. But I actually found that, I mean, I was a raver girl for several years in the midst of that. And so I felt like that ecstasy high running and completely sober. And I can tap into that now, like whenever I want. Obviously for me, it has like a lot to do with the music but it's all about the movement. And I think people, I mean, and it's not their fault because we have an entire culture or society, big pharma wants you to believe that you need an external solution, or at the very least, an external solution is more efficient and quicker. But I'm curious, were you ever on depression medication? Did you go through a journey there, or were you always just on your own dealing with it?
I'm on it now, actually, but it was the very last thing I did. And I'm glad I did it that way because it was just that missing 10%. And I'll get to the reasons in a minute, but I'm really happy that I did, dialing into physical stuff, like you said, like tapping into my own body, the nutrition stuff, the mindset stuff, just tapping into all these different tools I had, challenging myself. And, you were talking about these external things for a while there. My arrow was external. It was pointed out, like, 'cause I was like, oh, well, if I just graduate college, I'll feel whole. Well, if I graduate with honors, I'll feel whole. Okay. Well, I did that. And I was like, ugh. Okay. Well, if I become a personal trainer on top of it, then I'll feel whole, right? It's like an extra feather in my cap. Ugh. But it wasn't until I started like working with clients and getting that internal gratification, like really when I turned the arrow inward. So I love that you said that. Yeah, it can't come from external things. You got to turn the arrow inward. But yeah, the medication came last, and I briefly talk about this in the book. I'm on an SNRI, and I do explain like my side effects because there's a lot of fear going on it. But part of the reason I went on that is because I actually have a chronic pain issue in my arm. I have like a nerve thing in my neck. Mm-hmm. So the SNRI, they actually give it to people with fibromyalgia to help with chronic pain. So it was kind of like a 1-2 punch deal. And I wasn't like nearly suffering, with depression like I was, but it was that last 10%, like I said, around 8 p.m. I don't know if it was a testosterone drop or what. That's when things would start getting dark again. Mm-hmm. But now that I'm on that, it's now it feels like I'm feeling good, and I'm, like I said, I'm glad I did it that way because I did everything else I could. I mean, I spent a lot of time turning that arrow inward and working. So yeah.
Well, have you connected at all? Because I think, first of all, people underestimate how depressing it can be to be in constant pain. Like those things can coincide. And also, I think from my perspective, there is often like an emotional connection to a physical manifestation in the body.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that in terms of your pain specifically or your injury?
Absolutely. Well, I can't tell you the exact mechanisms that work because I don't know as far as the pain issue goes. I just know that my doctor said that they give it to fibromyalgia people for nerve pain. And then she stressed, she's like, you're just not carrying this anymore. Like there's that great book, The Body Keeps Score. Mm-hmm. So she's like, you're carrying this all right here. And that's where your injury is. And it's not like a serious thing. It's only the outside of my, it's a muscular thing. It's very odd. It's on the out, it's a scalene muscle. But she's like, you're not carrying that anymore. Like
shoulders, right?
Right. And she's like, so you just have that little bit of, the tolerances are very tight, with your nerves. And she's like, you're just letting it go that much. And that's what's relieving the pain. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? It's fascinating how your body just carries these things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my only experience is I have this yoga injury from almost a decade now. And it flares when I'm extremely stressed or I've spent like too much time working on the computer, or like all the things that I know that you kind of should, do in bits and pieces and take care of yourself around.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of my little being like, it's time to take a break. And it doesn't happen, I don't know, a couple times a year. It might flare up for some reason.
But that's a great point. I'm sorry to cut you off. There's a tiny delay, but yeah, that's a great point. So that's your indicator, right? That your body is stressed. Like that's your little, hey, it's time for you to chill out, right? So, there's a flip side to it. If you don't mind me asking, because I'm actually finishing up a yoga teacher training, what's the injury?
I personally think, like, I've never gone to see anybody about it or anything like that. It's just after years of doing, I personally think it's a chaturanga injury, not because I'm doing it wrong, but because it's like just repetitive stress injury.
Yeah.
Because when I do push-ups the normal way, it helps as well. Like it's just that I did this one action for a decade, and I think that's what it is. Sure. It's hard to say because it also really was post both my pregnancies. Like I'm sure it's like a complex, but basically under my right scapula in English.
Sure.
Shoulder blade. There we go. Sorry, sometimes I think in Spanish these days living in Mexico. I almost always teach yoga in Spanish. So under it's just, and I have had it, not x-rayed, but it's not, it's not anything to be worried about. My husband's a surgeon. He's like, there's no point in having surgery unless it's like a ball, of something, but it's non-malignant. And I personally think it's like a decade of oftentimes being like, more than a minute in chaturanga. Or repetitive. Like I also don't practice. I practiced for years, like really high, wouldn't say high impact, but vinyasa yoga, where it was just vinyasa.
Sure. You're moving. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, but enough about me. So tell us what, I don't know. I don't want to put a number on it, but can you give us some sort of major takeaways for you in your experience and everything you've studied in terms of nutrition that you think is key for people that are suffering or feeling like they may be more depressed than usual?
Okay, well, I'll start with everyone's a little different, of course, and I highly recommend that people get an allergy/intolerance test. My fiance actually got one on her back. They tested her for 80 different things. So yeah, no fun, but it wasn't terrible, right? So it's like these little tiny pinpricks, and they see what you react to. But now she knows there are certain foods that she's just no good with, right? I haven't had it done, but I know if I have a glass of milk, it's not going to end well. So, now what I typically recommend, like in my private practice, when I have people coming, is just go with something low inflammation. Like I like the Mediterranean diet, barring the things that don't work for you. I really like there's actually the anti-inflammation diet, I think it's called. I have the book that I like. I actually have it listed in my book. I bought it for 1 million people. I have a little list of suggested reading in the back of my book. But yeah, that anti-inflammation diet is fantastic. One of the reasons, though, that it's so important to dial in your diet is there's a theory now that, and I partially agree with this, just like there's no silver bullet cure, right? There's no like one cause. That's how I feel. That depression can be primarily a gut issue because you actually create more serotonin in your gut than you do in your brain. So people are giving probiotics to treat depression. I believe that's one aspect, right? But it's an aspect, right? Some people say it's an inflammation issue because of, even like speaking of small tolerances, right? If you have that tiny bit of inflammation in your brain, that could be, just offsetting things just the wrong way. So really the takeaway, man, I'm sorry I talk so much. takeaway. See what works for you. But yeah, I really like this low inflammation diet, but it is important to get your diet in check and see what works for you.
Yeah, I love that. Everything you said, those all things I would equally recommend. I think people sometimes underestimate. I mean, it's just good. The allergy test is a great suggestion, and everyone is different. Like something that could really be affecting one person isn't necessarily affecting someone else. So there's a big, it's important to understand our bio-individuality in that sense. And also there are certain things that, I mean, I grew up thinking drinking, 8-ounce glasses of milk every day was good for me. Whether or not it was as a kid is another discussion, but as an adult, there's very little evidence that that's necessary. And most people have all these other reactions and they're not even aware. And I think with the diet, I don't want to say problematic, but it can often be this buildup, like you can adapt to pretty much anything. And so it's not this direct relationship that's easy to see sometimes. It's because you've been eating this thing for a decade or 2 decades. And it's just like your body's now showing up like, you know what, we can't do this anymore. And so you have, you present with either physical or emotional, mental symptoms. So what else did you want to tell us about brain health? Because I love that that's one of your expertise.
I'll keep this one short, I promise you. Okay, so if you don't already, this is going to sound silly, but it's very actionable. I love actionable things. Start juggling, okay? Really, really good for your brain. And I'll let you guys Google it, but juggling is great for your brain. I'll give you one more because I talk so much. It's my new obsession. It's all the rage in the senior centers. Start playing pickleball. Good Lord. Have you ever played pickleball? Okay. So, Megan, I don't know what you're doing here. Pickleball, you got to get with it. Pickleball is kind of like a cross between like ping pong, like table tennis, and regular tennis. So you're on a regular tennis court, but it's a way smaller size, but you have like a giant ping pong ball. It's brilliant. And it's like a cross between the two. It's like standing gigantic ping pong. You feel like you either feel like you're a giant playing tennis or a really small like mouse playing ping pong. Either way is super fun, right? So yeah, highly, highly recommend it. Really good for your, I can't think of it, not your occipital lobe, but is it occipital lobe? No. For your coordination, doesn't matter. Start playing it. You guys can Google it.
Yeah, I know learning a second language is also really good for your brain, particularly as an adult. And as elderly people, like now, my mom was a teacher, she's retired, she's 70 now. And she always taught French. I'm Canadian, so we are forced to learn French pretty much all through elementary. But recently, because I married, my husband's Mexican, we live in Mexico. And so she's trying to learn Spanish and, she's making headway, but she's also it's more for the exercise of like mentally challenged, keeping your brain challenged in that way.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah.
Can you speak to the physical movement and brain health you already talked about what's it called? The ping pong giant mouse game.
Pickleball.
No, I've never heard of that.
It is the hot thing in the senior centers. I am not kidding you. There are pickleball leagues popping up all over the US right now. I'm not kidding. So anyway, side note, and I just moved, I'm moving next week, like across the street from a pickleball court. So I'm like so stoked. Anyway, that wasn't on purpose. So I'm just like really stoked on it. Anyway, so that when you do certain exercises, and all exercise is good for your brain, it's just depending on the exercise, it's going to affect different lobes of your brain. And what's physically going to happen is you're going to have the neurogenesis where your nerves are actually going to become more dense, more of that white and gray matter. And you're actually going to have angiogenesis where you're actually, it sounds kind of gross when you think about it, but you're actually growing more veins in your brain. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah. So, which is why I think, it's another good reason to change things up, even though like you and I both love yoga. Just like when treating depression, there's no silver bullet when it comes to fitness, right? Or health. So your brain's part of your body, right? So, if you love cycling and swimming, that's great for certain parts of your brain, right? But you're going to want to do things that have that coordination, like pickleball or even table tennis. But it's radical. It's so fascinating. And I recommend people go to the Functional Aging Institute. That's where I got my brain health certification. It's run by the guys. I don't know if you would know him, but Daniel Amen. He wrote Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. It's run by the guys who they trained under him. Guys and ladies who trained under him. They're the ones who started this Functional Aging Institute. Yeah, very fascinating. And you'll come away with 10 things you can do today for your brain health. Really cool site.
Love it. Well, I can't believe that there is pickleball actual courts. I have to Google this after we get off the call.
Okay. So I'll be honest with you. Okay, so all they do is they set up a net within a tennis court.
Okay.
So you like make it smaller. Yeah.
I feel like my kids have probably already watched this on YouTube, and I'm going to ask them what it is, and they're going to know because I'm just out of the loop. But why don't you tell us I'll obviously share all of your links in the show notes, but where can people find you, or how do you want people to connect with you if they want to connect? Really, the best way is just email me at zacksrutldege@gmail.com. I don't do like a whole lot of social media stuff just because that's not where I want to spend my energy. I don't have a team of people, and this isn't my career. This is a passion thing. So I have a Facebook page that I took off a few days ago. I'll put it back up. But the best way is just to email me, and I'll be happy. If anybody wants to email me, I'll be happy to send them a free chapter of the book if they want that, if they want to check it out. Awesome. And it's on Amazon, correct? Yep. The only place you can get it, because I like simplicity. Yeah, I had the same approach with my book. So the book is called The Depression Relief Playbook. I really like the title. Thank you. It's actionable, and I feel like it presents a sense of relief, even the title. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any sort of parting message or last bit of advice? Yeah. So obviously we want to be forgiving with ourselves, right? When we're going through these tough situations, or really in any situation, right? Because you wouldn't talk to somebody else the way you talk to yourself, right? And you're a person as well. So stop talking to yourself, stop talking to yourself in such harsh terms. But it's also important when you're in that deep depression, you have to be forgiving of other people when they say the wrong thing, and it's going to happen. They don't understand because they can't understand. If their intention is good, just be forgiving. That was something that took me a while to learn. So that's an important one, I think. Yeah, I love that. It is a huge lesson, I think. And I think self-forgiveness is probably harder. Both are hard, but it's a really important step to getting traction, having more awareness about where you want to be spending your energy. I'm a little jealous that you are not spending any energy on social media, because it's a lot of energy that you can spend there. So, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. And like I said, we'll share all those things in the notes. If you want, I can share your email as well. If not, please do. Yeah, share my email. That's the best way to get me, Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And you've been listening to Energetically You. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a screenshot and tag me on social media at Megan Swan Wellness, and we'll be seeing you in the next episode.